This is great. We're seeing lots of people logging in. All right, it is 7 o'clock. I am going to give people like maybe 1 or 2 minutes to log in. We have like about a quarter, maybe a fifth of the people that are signed up for tonight logged in already. So I'll give everybody another minute, but I don't want to wait too long to get started. I've got about 240 people signed up for tonight. Those of you that are here, can you hear me? In the questions box or the chat box on the right of your screen. Awesome. Sweet. Thank you so much. Good to get that sound check out of the way early. Just a few more seconds here, and then we will get logged in. My dog is barking at the window, of course. All right, well, we've got a good lot of us in here tonight, so we're going to go ahead and get started since we we want to respect your time. So good evening, and thank you all for connecting with the Pennsylvania Game Commission tonight. My name is Lori, and I'm just going to be managing this session. Some of you that already logged in, let me know that you could hear already, so that's great. We are going to shoot to keep the session at just over an hour in length. We expect the formalish part of the presentation to last about 40 minutes. There's going to be a video at the end. And then we're going to open it up to questions. And you'll see a questions tab at the right of your screen there. That's where you're going to be able to answer your questions. If we don't get to the question at the end, don't panic because everybody that signed up is going to get a copy of all the questions that were asked with all of the answers. We're going to send that to you. You'll also get a copy of the video that's at the end. We're going to make sure you get an email with all of those good resources in it. The session is also going to be recorded. It is being recorded, so you'll get a link to the recording. That will actually come in a separate email, but you'll also get that link. I think that takes care of all the housekeeping. So Derek Stoner is our presenter tonight, and he is going to introduce everybody else, and he is the hunting program coordinator with the Game Commission. Derek, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Laurie, and good evening, everyone. We really appreciate you joining us for Squirrel Hunting 101 this evening. We're excited to share with you a lot of great knowledge about how to squirrel hunt. We know we have an audience with a wide variety of hunting backgrounds. Some of you are new or newer to hunting, and we love to be able to help you out and give you some guidance on how to be a better, more proficient squirrel hunter. So this evening, we have a great team. Our Learn to Hunt team from the Pennsylvania Game Commission is a group of dedicated, passionate hunters, and we're ready, willing, and able to help you on your outdoor journey as you learn to hunt. So we've got Steve Smith, the Director of the Bureau of Information and Education, James Harbert, Hunter Education Assistant, AJ Garcia, Hunter Education Administrator, Seth Masoris, who's a State Game Warden and Information Education Supervisor, and Megan Thorpe, our Hunter Education Grant Administrator. So we really appreciate your support of conservation in Pennsylvania and for appreciating the wildlife that we're all able to enjoy in the Keystone State. So let's get started with our program. We have a lot to cover. Like Lori said, this will go about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we're going to watch the video, and then we'll have time for your questions. In Pennsylvania, we have a wide variety of small game animals that are legal to be hunted. They range from super abundant squirrels and their long multi-month season to the relatively rare snowshoe hare and its short 5-day hunting season. These small mammals and birds are small in stature, but they can be big fun for hunters that are seeking action-packed days of field in Pennsylvania. Our state has a rich tradition of small game hunting, and there's tens of thousands of hunters that pursue these animals each season. When you're heading afield in pursuit of squirrels, there are other small game animals that you may encounter, so it's important to be ready for additional harvest opportunities and be aware of the seasons for each of these species listed here. So the squirrels that we're going to cover tonight: cottontail rabbit is another small game species, snowshoe hare, ring-necked pheasant, ruffed grouse, bobwhite quail, crow, and woodchuck, also known as groundhog. So those are the small game categories that we have in Pennsylvania, and of course I call it categories because within the squirrel category we have multiple species, and we're going to talk about that next. In Pennsylvania, we have 3 main types, and they actually come into 4 different names here. The gray squirrel comes in a black form called black phase. So that's one species. It's just a different color. The black phase is a color form of a gray squirrel. Then there's the fox squirrel, which is a chunkier version of a gray squirrel, you might say. It has kind of a foxy orange color, and it's found in parts of Pennsylvania, but not all of the state. And then there's the red squirrel, which is a very small, tiny, and really active squirrel found in restricted range as well. They tend to be found in areas with conifer trees. So we're going to take a look at our next slide here that's going to show us a little bit about the relative size differences. A gray squirrel comes in at about a pound and a half. They're about 18 to 20 inches long, half of which is their tail. A fox squirrel is nearly 2 pounds. They're a little bit longer, a little bit chunkier compared to a gray squirrel. And then we have the red squirrel in the bottom right corner, and this guy is not a lot larger than a fast food hamburger, about 5.5 ounces, 12 inches long. They are a tiny little squirrel, and generally most squirrel hunters in Pennsylvania would not be targeting the red squirrel, but they are a legal squirrel species to be hunted. Now, this is a very critical point to understand. Do we have one protected species of squirrel in Pennsylvania called the flying squirrel? And flying squirrels are rarely seen, and they are highly nocturnal. So that means they're active at night. This particular individual is photographed during daylight, and if you notice, it's got very large eyes, which help it to see better at night. Flying squirrels can't actually fly, but they do glide, and they'll launch themselves from one tree trunk and glide to the next. They have flaps of skin between their front legs and their hind legs, and that allows them to cover a pretty good distance. Sometimes they've been seen or observed flying or gliding up to 50 or 60 feet. So most commonly, people might encounter these little squirrels if they have an attic or a barn or a bird box. Those are places that flying squirrels might go to build a home or hide out. And so in general, you're very unlikely to encounter flying squirrels in Pennsylvania. They're a wonderful surprise when you do get to see them. And so this is just something to keep in mind as you head afield, that there are other squirrels out there, but there's actually a perfect kind of harmony where the flying squirrel is active at night and will fall asleep at dawn, and that's right when the gray squirrels, the fox squirrels, and the red squirrels wake up. So those species will be day active, and the flying squirrel is their nighttime counterpart. It's important to understand squirrel biology when you're going afield to hunt them. And one thing we want to look at right away is their diet. So in general, we could say that squirrels eat a wide variety of plant foods, and they have a voracious appetite for seeds and nuts in particular. They've got excellent eyesight that helps them spot predators, hawks and foxes especially, and they're really adept at detecting humans moving through a woodland. So when you're heading afield looking for squirrels, it's really important to understand that they're very likely to spot you with their excellent eyesight. Of course, they can hear pretty well as well. And movement-wise, squirrels could definitely be described as being very fast and agile. They use their tail to balance in the upper parts of the trees and when they're leaping from branch to branch. If we wanted to kind of use a fun description for them, we could say that they are an arboreal athlete, meaning an athlete of the trees, and they're really, really good at climbing trees and hiding quickly. So that's something you'll discover rather easily when pursuing squirrels, is that when they know they're being chased, they are very good at hiding quickly and finding a hole in a tree or another place to disappear. So squirrels would be defined as being primarily crepuscular, and crepuscular is a big scientific word that means the peak of activity is centered around low light periods, meaning at dusk and at dawn. And so the early hours of each day and the late hours before it gets dark at the end of the day are generally the best times to be looking for squirrels when they're most active. They can, of course, be active during midday, but in general, you're going to find most of their activity to be centered around post-dawn and pre-dusk hours. Squirrels will make alarm calls to alert other squirrels in the area if there's danger, whether that's a hawk or a fox or a human. And so that's probably a sound that many of you have heard. We're going to send you in follow-up email, we're going to send you a link to learn more about these calls specifically. And I imagine many of you have heard them if you have squirrels in your backyard. Whenever a neighborhood cat or dog gets near, they typically set off the squirrels, and the squirrels will kind of bark and chuck and make a big racket to alert all the other squirrels in the area. If we're to look at the squirrels in terms of their behavior throughout the seasons, squirrel season starts in mid-September. It just started a couple Saturdays ago on September 11th this year. It's going to go to the very end of February, so it's quite a lengthy season, spanning 6 months. And so if we looked at the early part of the season, we could say in general, in September and October, squirrels are going to spend much of their time up in treetops, where the leaves make them pretty difficult to see. Once it gets to mid-season, in November and December, squirrels are going to spend much of their time gathering and storing nuts from the forest floor. And then when you get to the late season, when it's usually pretty cold, all the leaves are down, squirrels might be less active during this time because of the cold weather, and they might spend more of their time in their home in a hollow tree. They might feed less overall, and they might concentrate their activity during the warmer parts of the day. So this is a very general behavior pattern for all squirrel species. It really depends very much upon the weather, but throughout the seasons, much of their activity has to do with food availability, and you will discover that as you head afield in pursuit of squirrels, as you scout and find places where they're feeding. There'll be certain parts of the day that they're much more actively feeding, and other parts when they can be pretty quiet and rather difficult to find. So we're going to take sort of a little break here and talk about some fun facts about squirrels. These are really amazing animals. We probably tend to take them for granted. They're found almost anywhere there's trees, whether it's kind of a rural area, suburban, or urban area. But here's a few fun facts about them in general. The babies are only about 1 inch long when they're born, and most squirrels will give birth anywhere from 4 to 6 babies. In the wild, squirrels might live up to 12 years, which is a pretty good lifespan, but in general, because of high rates of predation, they'll only live 2 or 3 years on average. Squirrels are able to find nuts that have been buried under more than a foot of snow, and so they have both a good sense of memory and a sense of smell that kind of combines to help find those nuts. Squirrels are not just herbivores. They occasionally will eat bird eggs and nestlings or baby birds in the spring, along with occasional insects and even roadkill. They've been documented eating dead animals on the roadside. Squirrels' front teeth never stop growing, so they always need to be gnawing on and chewing on hard objects, whether those are nuts or sometimes bones. They're well known for chewing on the antlers of deer that have fallen and the bones of deer and other animals there in the woodlands. Squirrels get calcium and other minerals from the bones they chew, and they also um, grind those teeth down because, as it just saw right there, they're never going to stop growing. Their front teeth are continually growing. And squirrels, as we just mentioned earlier, studies have shown that they rely more on their memory. They essentially create a map in their memory of where they have buried or stored all the nuts that they've gathered. And that's a really interesting thing to think of, that they probably have hundreds of, if not thousands of nuts that they store during the fall months. And then later on, when there's less food available, they're going to try to find it using that memory map of theirs. So one way that squirrels will evade predators is to zigzag. So evolution has kind of thinned out the squirrels that run in a straight line or predictable, and the ones that are better at surviving zigzag or kind of jump back and forth side to side when evading a predator. And that's a way that the hawk or the fox that's chasing them might be less likely to capture that squirrel. Hind legs on squirrels are double jointed, which is going to allow them to climb up and down trees really quickly. So we've all seen how fast those squirrels can scamper not only up a tree, but also down a tree trunk head first. And it's only possible because they're double jointed, which makes them quite athletic and able to do things that most other animals would not be able to. Squirrel habitat and homes. This is an interesting topic to consider. We have kind of pictured here in the upper right corner some of their favorite nuts. Acorns and hickory nuts and beech nuts are providing both food and shelter for squirrels. And as we mentioned earlier, basically wherever there are trees, there will be squirrels. It's pretty much a given that you'll find squirrels in the presence of trees and vice versa. So typically, squirrels will sleep and nest in a cavity, in a hole, usually in a large older tree. Sometimes that cavity takes the form of something made by humans, whether it's a barn or an attic, or sometimes they adopt nest boxes that are intended for animals like wood ducks or screech owls. So squirrels are pretty adaptable and will find a way to make a home in a lot of different spaces. And they also build what we would call a day nest out of dry leaves that allows them to hide in during daylight hours, where they essentially are taking a nap. This slide here is showing us two very different types of woodland habitat. So on the left is what we would call early successional thicket. And so this is an area where there's a lot of young trees and then an understory of brambles, maybe like blackberry or raspberry, a lot of wildflowers. And so for squirrels, that habitat is not ideal. There's not places to hide. The trees aren't big enough to have cavities. There's relatively little food available for them. And for the hunter, it's going to be pretty difficult to hunt and walk through. So if we contrast that with the woodlands shown on the right, these mature woodlands really are ideal squirrel habitat. So there's generally going to be a lot of cavities in the trees where they can hide, plenty of food availability, not just in the fall with the nut and seed crops, but year-round there's usually a lot more food for a squirrel to obtain in a mature woodland. And then the big bonus for the hunters is that a mature woodland is a lot easier to walk through. You can walk through quietly without bumping into trees. You can kind of plan a path ahead pretty well, and it's a lot easier to kind of walk quietly through the mature woodland and to spot squirrels from a distance. It's really important to take a look at what squirrels are eating during the fall, because this is going to drive where you'll find them and also when you'll find them in certain areas. And so if we would look at maybe the top four, some of the most popular nut crops in Pennsylvania, we certainly would always start with acorns from oak trees. There's a wide variety of oak trees found across the state of Pennsylvania. We break them into two categories, the red oak and white oak families, and we'll talk about them later on in the video. The beech nut, coming from the American beech tree, is a very important nut. It's not a very large one, but it packs a lot of carbohydrates and fats that they crave and need during the fall and winter. Hickory nuts are also incredibly important. We've got several species of hickories found across Pennsylvania that provide literally tons of food for squirrels. And black walnuts are always attractive to squirrels wherever they're found, and they particularly can be found near people's homes. And if you have a black walnut in your yard, you've certainly seen a lot of squirrels piling in there to enjoy the good food. So collectively, these hard to chew nuts are called hard mast, M-A-S-T. And so hard mast nut crops are really, really popular and highly favored by squirrels because of the fat and carbohydrates they provide, which help the squirrel put on a layer of fat that'll help it survive during the winter or other times of food scarcity. Now, to contrast with hard mast, there's a different category called soft mast, and this would be things like berries, apples, and seeds. So we've got a few pictured here, maybe some of the more popular, more common ones across the state. There's several species of wild cherry tree that produce tiny, dark colored cherries. Unlike the cherries that we would typically eat, these are cherries that are more purplish in color. Dogwood berries, which are bright red, those are highly favored by squirrels. Dogwood's often found in your yard as a landscape tree, but they do grow in the wild across Pennsylvania. There's a lot of species of crab apples, and hawthorns. They're all in the same family. They all produce a nice fruit that squirrels love. So that's definitely a tree to be on the lookout for when you're scouting for squirrels to hunt. And then the maple family, we have multiple species of maple in Pennsylvania, and this is really an important food for squirrels. They eat the tiny maple seed, and they will spread them, scatter them throughout the woods. And it's definitely something important to acknowledge that squirrels are actually one of the very best tree planters in nature. They inadvertently lose or do not remember where they stored some of these seeds and nuts, and next spring that might sprout into a young tree. And so squirrels are an unintentional forest creator. Here's a few more squirrel food preferences to keep in mind. Pine cones, whether they're from white pines or maybe a spruce cone or a hemlock cone, those are very popular, particularly with red squirrels. So a red squirrel is often a cone specialist, and they will store cones in a hollow tree, or sometimes if somebody has a shed out in the woods, they'll open up the door and they'll find hundreds of cones that a red squirrel has stored there. And then there's a variety of different berries, things like beauty berries, the large purple clusters of tiny berries in the upper right, even poison ivy berries. So a plant that we tend to not like a whole lot, they produce a lot of white berries in the fall, and squirrels eat them. And then sumac berries, which are bright red and shown in the lower right corner, those are pretty popular with squirrels as well. So there's a lot of other foods that squirrels will feed on. We just showed you a dozen here as examples. And when you go out hunting, it's going to be a really good opportunity for you to try to learn more about what squirrels eat. Now we're going to talk about some of the tactics that would be recommended to use in pursuit of squirrels. And we could break that down into two categories, stationary and mobile. We're going to start out with stationary. So waiting and watching for squirrels to appear can be really challenging, and it's going to put your senses to the test. Squirrel hunting in general is going to require really keen woodsmanship skills, and that means the ability to interpret the signs and sounds in the forest while being able to behave like a predator and ready to react at all times. So as we mentioned earlier, the times after dawn and before dusk are generally going to be the best for seeing squirrels be most active. And if you find a cloudy day with kind of low light levels, those are also ideal for spurring on squirrel activity. So when you've settled in and found a stationary location, likely against a trunk of a big tree, it's really good to just get real quiet and then listen for rustling leaves, scratching bark, or the nuts dropping to the forest floor that the squirrels are knocking down from up in the canopy. So those are some of the things to keep in mind as you get set up with a stationary approach to squirrel hunting. And as we just mentioned, getting against a tree or maybe sitting on a comfortable stool or cushion for 15 to 30 minutes at least is a good idea. If you don't hear or see any squirrels after a while, it might be wise to consider moving to a new location. Sometimes just making a move of 100 yards or less is all that's going to be needed to find new squirrels or active squirrels. And if you fire a shot and hit a squirrel or unluckily miss a squirrel, it's a good idea just to wait there until the woods quiet down and other squirrels might become active again. So don't stop hunting or kind of give up on that spot just because you fired a shot. So the squirrels have to feed and be active regardless of what sounds they hear. And a gunshot is not necessarily going to shut down their activity for a long period of time. Now, mobile hunting and stalking. This is a great tactic for people who are a little more inclined to move and be active and want to explore the woods. And so by walking and sneaking slowly through the woods, kind of looking ahead and scanning with binoculars, that helps quite a bit. If you've got a pair of binoculars, we highly recommend taking them along when you hunt squirrels. It saves you a lot of trouble. It helps you spot the squirrels at a distance and make an approach and be able to kind of detect them before they detect you. So when you're mobile hunting squirrels, it's a good idea to pause occasionally, kind of take a break for a few minutes to look and listen. And if you have a squirrel that starts kind of barking at you, this low chuckling sound, try to track down that sound, like cup your ears towards it and then make an approach, because just because a squirrel is making a sound in alarm doesn't mean you can't potentially get a shot at it. Sometimes they'll kind of boldly chatter at you and you can just slowly sneak up on them and get within range for a shot. And it's definitely worth doing because you really have nothing to lose at that point. So when you're on the move, you might alert the squirrels and they're going to issue those alarm calls. But a tactic to consider is if you're hunting with a partner, you could have the one partner circle around to the opposite side of the tree, and that might cause the squirrel up in the tree to shift its position and present a shot to the person standing in place. Now, this is really critical, of course, to always keep safety in mind, always be sure of the other hunter's position, and you're only going to take a safe upward shot. If the squirrel were to scamper down the tree trunk and run on the ground, you would not be taking a shot in any direction because that other hunter would be nearby, and you have to be always mindful of where your hunting partner is. But if you're hunting alone, you might be able to pull a trick on the squirrels where if the squirrel's kind of hiding up in the top of a tree, you could pick up a stick or a big branch and toss it to the opposite side of the tree from where you're standing. And that sometimes encourages the squirrel to move around and expose itself for a shot. Once again, it's worth a try because once the squirrels have kind of figured out you're there, it might take them a while to settle down. But as a mobile hunter, if it doesn't work out with that squirrel, you can just move on through the woods and probably find another one in short order. So with a shotgun, which is probably the most common hunting tool for squirrel hunters, you can definitely and should be definitely prepared to take moving shots as the squirrel climbs tree trunks or runs through branches. Now, you don't have to take the moving shot, and we not advise it if the squirrel is moving really quickly. But as most of us have seen, when a squirrel is, say, feeding in the treetops or crawling up and down branches, they seem to be perpetually in motion. And that's one benefit of a shotgun is that your pattern of pellets spreads. And in general, with a typical squirrel load, you'll have at least 200 or 300 pellets or more that are going to kind of swarm out there and be able to hit the squirrel in a relatively wide pattern. Your pattern might be, at least 2 to 3 feet wide, and that is what would allow you to hit the squirrel if it's moving a little bit. If you're only waiting for a stationary shot, that might be difficult, but that is the challenge that people take up when they are rifle hunting for squirrels. So a rifle hunter or a bow hunter always only has one projectile, only one one bullet or one arrow tip flying through the air. So in that case, you need to be prepared to take a headshot or maybe a shot right behind the shoulder at the squirrel. So always be safe. Always be sure that you have a safe backstop like a tree trunk or the ground before taking a shot. You need to make sure that the animal is not what we call skylined or silhouetted at the top of a hill or crest of a hill. You need to always know what's beyond your target when you're shooting at it. We mentioned earlier something about the day nests, these big clusters of leaves. They're usually the size of a beach ball or so and way up in the treetops. There's a special term for them. They're called drays. And these dry leaf clusters are where the squirrel might take a nap during the day. So on the other hand, if you're looking at the forest floor, you might see disturbed leaves or scratched up leaves that are indicating where squirrels are digging for fallen nuts or other food. And you're also likely to see what we call cuttings, which is the places where squirrels gather and chew up nuts and leave behind the husk or the outer shell of the nut. So that's something to keep an eye out for as well. And this will be shown in the video that we have to share after this presentation. This photo here in the upper left shows you a little bit of what cuttings would look like, though. These are hickory nuts, and the outer hull or husk is green, and when they've been chewed on, you see the brown underlayer of the soft outer part of the nut, and then under the soft part is the hard part of the nut. So there's actually multiple layers the squirrel chews through to get at what we would call the nut meat. So if you find freshly chewed nuts, whether they're hickory or like this squirrel in the photo here has chewed open a black walnut, or if you're finding the classic acorns, that is obviously a key clue that squirrels are really active in an area. So most likely they're going to return and resume feeding that location. So it's a good idea to make note of that spot and return later to hunt, or if you're ready then, just set up and see if you can get the squirrels to come out again. The season, as we mentioned earlier, season for squirrels kicked off a couple weeks ago on September 11th, and this early part of the season provides a great opportunity for young hunters to get a field in pretty nice weather before a lot of the other hunting seasons start, particularly deer hunting season for archery. So if you know a youngster or anyone new to the hunting game that wants to try squirrel hunting, it's often much more pleasant to get out this time of year before things get colder. And so this time in Pennsylvania is very exciting. This particular hunting season, for the first time ever, we're going to have small game hunting open on 2 Sundays. So Sunday hunting is new to Pennsylvania, and we're going to be offering 2 Sundays this fall for hunting squirrels and other small game. And those dates are Sunday, November 14th and Sunday, November 21st. So consecutive Sundays in the middle of November, and that'll provide a great opportunity as well to get out in some prime mid-to-fall conditions for squirrels and other small game across Pennsylvania. So this photo here is showing us a couple ladies out in the squirrel woods, and they're exhibiting and displaying the proper blaze orange safety clothing that's required for squirrel hunting. So squirrel hunters must wear a minimum of 250 square inches of blaze orange clothing on the head, chest, and back combined. So you must wear a orange hat of some type. So whether it's like a baseball style hat as shown on the left, or a knit hat as shown on the right. And then for a top, the small game vest that you see on the female hunter on the left here is the classic small game hunting vest. So in the back of the vest, it's blaze orange as well, and there's a pouch where you can put squirrels, rabbits, other small game animals that you've harvested. And then the hunter on the right here is just simply wearing a full blaze orange knit top, kind of like a sweatshirt style. It'd be real comfortable in different temperatures. So as long as you're wearing true blaze orange, it has to be what is called blaze or fluorescent orange and not just a orange-ish color. You need to buy official hunter orange at an outdoor store, or plenty of places offer these online. So the other key requirement to understand about squirrel hunting is that the daily limit, what's called the daily bag limit, is 6 squirrels per day. And so that could be 6 gray squirrels, or it could be 4 gray squirrels and 2 red squirrels, or 6 fox squirrels. Whatever you're harvesting of legal squirrel species, the total you're allowed to have harvested or killed in one day is 6. And if you're using a shotgun, which many folks will when they get started in squirrel hunting, there must be a plug that limits the shell capacity to 3 shells total. So you have 1 shell ready to shoot and 2 in the tube ready to load up in case you need a second or third shot. But only 3 shells total in a shotgun is what's legal in Pennsylvania for squirrel hunting. So we want to share with you some tips, because squirrel hunting can be real challenging. During the fall and winter, when you're able to see a good distance in the woods, you might just want to take a walk through the area in the late afternoon and make note of where you encounter or spook squirrels. You'll see them running up the trees and chattering at you. And that would be an area, if you've got a high concentration of squirrel activity, to consider just coming out the next morning then and setting up for an hour or 2 or more and just taking advantage of the abundance of squirrels in that area. That's a smart tactic. And to kind of contrast this, if you are then in hunt mode the next day and you want to still hunt through the woods, it's really smart to imagine moving in like a ghost-like manner, like almost like a ninja. You want to be very stealthy and try to be undetected in the woods, because squirrels are very, very adept at spotting anything out of the ordinary, whether it's, as we said earlier, a normal predator like a fox or a hawk, or something like a house cat or a human in the middle of the woods. If they're not used to seeing it, they're going to take note and either hide or chatter or try to figure out what's going on before they resume their normal activity. One fun thing to consider is that you could utilize a squirrel call, and that takes the form of many different calls. You have some that are made of wood, some that are made of metal or plastic or rubber, but the main thing that they do is they create sounds that might attract the attention of squirrels and get them to respond. The squirrel's not likely to come running into you. It's not like a turkey call that's meant to draw them right in, but it's meant to get them to reveal themselves and kind of give away their location. And once you have that auditory confirmation of a squirrel's location, that's often all you need to get you headed in the right direction to approach them close enough for a shot. So listening for squirrels is probably more important than looking. So we really recommend that you try hunting on days that are not as windy. The wind just makes the woods real noisy, and it makes it often difficult to see. The leaves are blowing around. It's tough to see squirrels. And squirrels don't really like that as well. They tend to like hole up and hide during these types of conditions. So in general, we can say that windy days are the enemy of squirrel hunting, and it's usually a little bit better to get out on days that are calmer and less windy overall. So if the squirrels are holed up, as we just mentioned, if they're hiding out, not active on the ground, it can be really difficult to get a shot at them. So if they're at the entrance to their hole, like this one shown here, we would highly recommend not taking the shot, because what will happen is that squirrel is just going to fall back in the hole and die in the hole, and you're not going to be able to retrieve it. And so in this situation, certainly worth considering using the squirrel call, or you could use something like a crow or hawk call to try to agitate the squirrel, get it to respond and come out of its hole. And occasionally this works, so it's worth trying. And the main thing to consider is just be ready for a quick shot in these scenarios, because the squirrel is going to respond and try to go back into hiding right away. So we mentioned already that shotguns are by far the most common type of gun utilized for squirrel hunting. And if we are sharing with you here these 4 main types of shotguns: break open, pump, semi-auto, double barrel, this could probably be pretty confidently stated that most squirrel hunters tend to use pump shotguns, but there's many different options to try. So whatever shotgun you have already, if you do have one, will certainly be serviceable as a squirrel gun. And the most important thing to do is to make sure you're selecting the right size shot shell for the gun and making sure that you have practiced with it and patterned it and understand its effective range. So shotgun shells with small pellets are going to do a lot less damage to the meat of a squirrel. And so typically the size shot that's used for squirrel hunting is size 6 or 7.5. And this is pretty standard for what we would call target shooting. So if you're shooting clay targets for upland game like pheasants, that would be the same size small shot that would be used for squirrels. And so as you can see on this box of shells, it says upland and small game, and it says it's 20 gauge, which is a very popular gauge for squirrels, and it says 6 shot. So 6 and 7.5 is by far what we would recommend for squirrel hunting to do minimal damage to the meat. We mentioned rifles are generally less commonly used than shotguns, but they're a lot of fun and a big challenge. You only have a single projectile. And in our state of Pennsylvania, the legal requirement for a rifle for squirrel hunting is that it has to be in 22 caliber or smaller, so generally 22 and 17 caliber rifles, and they have to be rim fire. So the classic 22 rim fire is what's legal, but not center fire. So 22 rim fire is what most squirrel hunters will use when they choose a rifle, and most of the time, shots with a rifle are going to be at 50 yards or less. So even though they certainly are capable of shooting further, more accurately, it's important to understand that you're shooting at the head of a squirrel, which is about the size of a golf ball. They're often pretty active, and even if they sit still for a moment, they might suddenly move. So you need to be ethical and take shots at a stationary squirrel that's in reasonable range. So often, like we said, 50 yards or less. Even if you have a scope and a really nice dialed in rifle, it's always important to make sure you're taking safe and effective shots at squirrels. With a shotgun, in general, most hunters will keep their shots to 30 yards or less. And one other thing we want to share and mention to everyone is that in Pennsylvania, it's also legal to use air rifles to hunt squirrels. However, they must have a pellet and be loaded with a lead pellet or non-toxic pellet rather than a BB. So that classic BB gun, that Red Ryder BB gun that everybody knows about, that is not legal for squirrels. The BB projectile is not allowed to be used. You must use a pellet. And the pellet is pretty much just like the same bullet that would come out of the rimfire 22 or 17 caliber. So when you're taking the shot with a rifle, you would aim for the center of the squirrel's head in order to give yourself a little room for air. And with a shotgun, we would recommend you might hold kind of off a little bit off the end of the squirrel's nose in order to limit the number of pellets that you get into the meat and not center your pattern directly on the squirrel's body. Ideally, you're basically trying to pepper the head, meaning just hit the head but leave the body less hit or unscathed. And as we said, be sure to pattern your shotgun ahead of time by shooting at paper targets at a shooting range and make sure you understand what kind of pattern density you're getting and shoot at an actual squirrel target and make sure you're putting plenty of pellets onto the squirrel to be able to make a clean, ethical kill. Now, we are going to be cheering for you and hoping that you're able to harvest the squirrel. And this is where a lot of new hunters are unsure what to do. And this is a key requirement as a hunter is you have to eat the game that you harvest. And so in order to get it to the table and cook it, you have to first process it. And processing simply means taking the animal with the fur on and getting it to the stage in which it's ready to be consumed. And so when you're processing squirrels, we recommend you wear protective gloves, use a sharp knife, and a small bladed hunting knife is ideal. Often the recommendation is to cut into the hide in the middle of the carcass and kind of make an inner tube-like incision, and then pull the hide apart in opposite directions. And this is some nice illustration here that gives us an idea of what this might look like. The image on the left shows the cuts that are made. In general, you're getting the main meat of the squirrel from the front legs and the hind legs, just as you would on most mammals. It's just like a deer, and deer's body in miniature. And so the bulk of the meat is coming off those rear legs. You do get a little bit of meat along the back. Sometimes people will simply cook the entire carcass of the squirrel in, say, a crock pot, and that's really popular. But they also might just kind of take the legs and cook them up in the style almost like you would chicken legs. So squirrels have really tough skin that's a little difficult to remove, and so it's important to take your time cutting them apart. And then once you have the hide off, the hair off, soak them in cold water to get off dirt, blood, and any hair that needs to be removed. So there's another illustration kind of what that inner tube cut is like, where you cut the squirrel in the middle, peel back the fur towards the head and towards the tail, and then you'll be able to get out the meat and make the cuts that are recommended. We'll send everybody a video, a really high quality video on how to field dress a squirrel, because it is rather complicated the first time you do it, but once you've done it a few times, you'll build that confidence and it'll become much, much easier. So as we said, cooking squirrels is a real treat. We do hope you get to taste squirrel. It's got a unique flavor, certainly not like chicken, but as I said, people will cook it up just as you might cook chicken. So you see fried squirrel and biscuits there illustrated, and then something a little more exotic, acorn crusted squirrel with mustard sauce there in the lower right. So if you haven't eaten dinner already, this might get you hungry and get you excited to get out and harvest squirrels. We have on our agency's website, our Hunt Wild PA blog, we have recipes there online. Our agency offers a wild game cookbook for sale as well. That's really highly recommended. So no matter what, we really hope you all have an opportunity to enjoy eating squirrel or other wild game this season. And we're really excited to help you out on your journey as a new hunter in search of game to harvest. So we really appreciate you joining us for this part of the presentation, but we're not done yet. We're going to toggle over to show you a video now. The video is 4 minutes in length. And during this time, when you're watching the video, we're going to encourage you, if you've not yet done so, to put some questions into the question box or chat box. We want to hear from you, whatever you're looking to know that we didn't yet cover about squirrel hunting and the associated topics. Please put them out there so we can answer your questions after this short video.
I'm Megan, and I'm with the Pennsylvania Game Commission, and we're out here scouting for squirrels, getting ready for the fall season. Just walking out the trail, if you look around, you can see different trees, there's different food sources, and one of the things I noticed when we came out are these hickory nuts. Now if you look a little bit closer, you can see that there's a lot of scrapings on these nuts, and there's a lot of pieces over here and cuttings, and this is from squirrels eating in the treetops. So if it were me, I would come in really early in the morning and I would set up at this big tree over here. It has a little bit more cover and I'm a little bit distanced from the tree so I can see the squirrels up in the tree a little better than I would if I was right under it.
One of the best parts about squirrel hunting is how it helps you become much more in tune with what's in the woodlands and forests of Pennsylvania. You get to learn about the trees and the foods they produce, which is what the squirrels are attracted to when you're going hunting them. So everybody knows acorns, and we have a variety of oak species in Pennsylvania, but we could probably say it's easiest to categorize them in two families. There's the red oak that has sharp pointed lobes, so this is a red oak here. And then there's the white oak, which has rounded lobes. And the rounded lobes of the white oak are a really good identifying feature of that species. So here we have a couple acorns. Here's a red oak acorn and a white oak. The white oak tends to be more favored by squirrels, more palatable, generally provides more energy for them. So typically, once you get in the month of September, some oaks will start dropping a few of their acorns, but peak acorn drop in Pennsylvania is going to be in October and November. Another tree species to try to learn as a squirrel hunter would be the American beech. So beech trees, B-E-E-C-H, are fantastic squirrel food. This is what their leaves look like. I often say they're kind of like a ruffled potato chip with the pattern of ribbing on the leaves, and then they have a sharp tip at the end. These are beech nuts, very, very tiny. So in each hand here I'm holding a little beech nut. They have little sort of curved bristles on them, and when you peel them open, a squirrel would peel them open, it'll discover inside two tiny little pieces of nuts that look like um, little triangles. And so that's the American beech nut, and that's a very popular tree in the squirrel's diet each fall. So today we're out here in September in the early fall squirrel woods, we might say, and we're finding a lot of hickories that have been chewed on by squirrels. And so these are called Nut Hickory, and Nut Hickory, the nuts are pretty small, about the size of a grape, and these are in various stages of being chewed on by squirrels. They're doing what's called cutting, so they're cutting the outer hull or husk off of the nut, and they're getting at the nut meat inside. So these hickory nuts are all over the forest floor here. Thousands of them literally are here. They've been chewed on by squirrels, and that tells us this is going to be a primo spot to hunt squirrels this fall.
The Pennsylvania Game Commission provides 1.5 million acres of state game lands that's available for public use. Anyone's welcome to purchase a hunting license and partake in the great outdoors here. I really enjoy squirrel hunting. It's a great way to stay out on the land a little bit longer than just in the winter. If you're interested in learning more about state game lands, squirrel hunting, or how to just get started hunting, please visit our website and find the Get Started Hunting page.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I understand that the video might not have played for all of you, and we apologize for that. As we said, we'll send it out in an email to everyone who's registered for the webinar. And right now, we're going to get into your questions. So we'll turn it back to Laurie.
Great. Thanks so much. All kinds of good stuff. So we have some questions about what squirrels might taste like.
All right, that's an excellent question. I just shared with you those photos. We talked about that, but what do they taste like? So I'm going to ask this question of Steve Smith and see if he can share with us what squirrels taste like.
Sure, I'll take a stab at that, Derek. Thanks. In my experience, having eaten a lot of squirrel, you mentioned kind of like chicken, and that's probably the thing that I would compare it to the most. But it's definitely sweeter. It's lighter and it's sweeter. A lot of it depends on the time of the year, what the squirrel's been eating. But in this early season, when there's plenty of mass on the ground, there's plenty of acorns, walnuts for them to be eating. I definitely detect a real sweet flavor to it. That's probably the best way that I can think of to describe it. I know that there's several other of our PGC staff here on the line who have tried squirrel and eaten it quite regularly as well. So I'll open it up if anybody else has any other way of describing it. But the first, whenever I'm asked about this, the first thing that comes to mind is it's got a sweeter taste than chicken, and it's definitely lighter. So if anybody else has their own experiences, please feel free to share.
Yeah, AJ, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, for me, most of my squirrel experience, it's not chicken related. I mean, it's not as sweet, but most of my hunting experiences come out of Oklahoma. We have a lot of red oak, and the squirrels there are eating a lot of red oak, but it's a little It's a little heavier as opposed to lighter, but I'd have to say the taste is a little more meatier than light. It, but I've had a few squirrels here. The gray squirrels I've taken here have been comparable to a lot of the squirrels that I've taken in Oklahoma. Uh, I don't compare squirrel to chicken. I don't compare any game to chicken, honestly. Everybody says it tastes like chicken. No, actually, it doesn't. These are wild game animals that forage on the land that they live in. So they're feeding, and that does affect the flavor of the meat. But squirrel is not a heavy tasting animal to consume. That's the best I can give you.
Just gonna have to all try it and find out. Thank you guys for your input. What other questions do we have, Lori?
We have some questions about any diseases or sicknesses in squirrels that people might want to be aware of when they're going out hunting, things they wouldn't want to eat, I think is the key.
Yeah, I'll take this question. This is a question that's come up earlier in presentations, and it's one that's asked of our agency quite often. There is one main disease that affects squirrels, in particular early in the season. It's called, they get these growths on their body, these bumps, and it's called warbles, W-A-R-B-L-E-S. And it looks really bad, but it has been well studied and it's not shown to be dangerous to humans. It's not a communicable disease, anything like that. But in general, the advisement is if you shoot a squirrel that's covered in these warbles to not consume it, to just bury it in the woods. And it's very, very rare, very uncommon, rarely something that occurs. We'll send the link to that information on our website. And squirrels in very, very rare situations have been documented to be carriers of rabies, but much, much less common than the well-known mammals like raccoons, foxes, bats, and others. And so out of the hundreds of thousands of squirrels harvested in Pennsylvania each year, there are very few that are ever reported to show any signs of disease. The meat, as long as you cook it at 160 degrees or higher, is going to be fine and fine to be consumed at that temperature of cooking. And so we'll share with you, as we said, some more information about it. But in general, squirrels are not carriers of many diseases, and certainly not diseases that are communicable through humans. So an excellent question, and we'll be sure to share more information with you about that. Thank you.
All right. We have a question about possession limit. Is it the possession limit that you mentioned, is that per hunter or per group?
Sure. This is a great question for Game Warden Seth Masouras. So the possession limit of 18 squirrels. Can you tell us what that is all about, Seth?
Yes, a possession limit of 18 squirrels. Some people come from out of state. Sometimes they come here and hunt or go to camp for a weekend to hunt for a long weekend. And that is basically 3 days worth of bag limits that they can have in their possession at that time in possession. So we're allowing them to have 3 separate days bag limits if they're up at camp for a long weekend, say Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and they happen and lucky enough and fortunate enough to limit out all 3 days, they would be allowed to have that in their possession.
Great. All right. Here's maybe another one for Seth. When does the season end?
I don't have the correct date right off the top of my head, but the season is very long. I believe Derek
Okay.
alluded to it. It ends in February. Yeah. It ends in February. It starts in September. There's some minor breaks in between. I know that. but it definitely is a long season, and it comes back in and doesn't end, I believe, until the end of February.
Yeah, that's correct. We'll send that information along as well. That's a real critical question. There is a short break, as Seth just mentioned there, for or during the firearm season for deer in Pennsylvania. But in general, it's going to be running from mid-September all the way to the end of February. So 5.5 months of opportunity. Good
It
question.
looks like February 28th would be the official last day. From December 27th to February 28th is how the last season runs, excluding Sundays, obviously, during that season.
Yeah.
All right, and we've got some firearm questions. So I'm going to give you three. Is 410 a good choice? Is a 12 gauge too powerful for the number 6 shot? And how do I tell if my 22 is a rim fire or center fire?
All right, this is AJ. I'll take that. 410, definitely a good squirrel gun. You know, it's light recoil, but you're looking at the size of your shot. You want number 6 to number 4 shot. Remember, the larger the number, the smaller the shot. So number 6 is going to be smaller than number 4. I wouldn't go with a larger shot in any shotgun, with number 4 being the largest shot. That's kind of your limit there. You can use 7.5s. I personally, I like a little larger shot because of kinetic energy and retention, how much the shot retains as far as energy, because squirrel hide is tougher than you might think. You skin a squirrel and you find number 6 shot embedded between the hide and the muscle groups. So 5, 6 shot, number 4 shot, you can use 7.5, but I wouldn't go smaller than 7.5. And 410, definitely, yeah. It's a light recoil, especially for smaller framed or younger hunters. So yeah, that's simple. Number 12 or 12 gauge, again, it's the same kind of thing. 12 gauge is a standard gauge. It comes down to your choke. How tight of a pattern are you throwing the shot compared to the distance you're planning to hunt your squirrels? If they're, 10 to 30 yards, yeah, I like a full choke. If you're going to go further out, you may want a wider choke, or sorry, got to reverse that. You may want an open choke closer versus slinging a tighter pattern further out. Sorry, guys. I don't hunt under 30 yards. All my birds, all my squirrels, all my rabbits, I've never shot a deer with a rifle or a muzzleloader over 75 yards. I hunt close. So I'm very familiar with ballistics and shooting long distance. I just don't hunt that way. So I have to kind of readjust my thought process. Keep it close, keep it tight, and no matter how close and how tight you are, it's a shot pattern that's going to reduce the amount of damage to the consumable meat. I like a full choke in anything I'm going to do with squirrel with a shotgun. I'm a rifle hunter with squirrels. That leads us to the next question. Rimfire. 22 Magnum, 17 HMR. Headshot. And in Pennsylvania, where there are a lot of close safety zones, residentials, I opt for a subsonic 22 long rifle round. They don't go as far, they don't have as much force or kinetic energy at the end of their effective range, and it's much shorter for the effective range. So yeah, oftentimes I will use a subsonic 22 long rifle round. 22 long rifle is a rimfire. Your center fires, they're very different. It's obvious that the firing pin strikes the primer in the very center at the base of the cartridge. The rimfire, very obvious. You hit it anywhere in the rim and it will ignite the primer to ignite the powder. I hope that answers questions.
That's
All
great.
right.
Thank you so much, AJ.
All right, we have, let's see, a question. Is it hard to cook squirrels?
Oh, I want that one.
Oh,
No, it's not hard. I mean, you can do about anything with a squirrel. I'll put them on a water smoker. I'll put them in the crock pot. I'll quarter them up and, crust them like chicken and fry them up in a pan. It's not hard. It really is no different than cooking a chicken as far as cooking goes. Now, flavor is a different story again, but yeah, it's not hard. It is so easy. Anything you want to do, just cook your meat thoroughly, recommended by the Food and Drug Administration. What you choose to do with it and cook it less than recommended, that will be on you.
all right. I have some new hunter type questions, Derek.
Yeah.
As a first-time hunter, what should I do first? And maybe I'll pair that with, is there a mentorship program to learn how to hunt?
Sure. I'll turn that question over to Steve Smith about as a first hunter, what should I do to get started squirrel hunting?
Okay, great. Thanks, Derek. And what a great question. So I would say first thing, you're doing the first thing right. You're joining us here today on this webinar about learning how to hunt. This is a program that we've designed specifically for brand new hunters of any age who want to get out there, and we want to provide you with the resources. We want you to be successful. So you're at the right place, and we're going to continue to provide more resources down the road. This is, I believe, the third presentation we've done now. All of them have been recorded. We have a ton of resources already, and we'll be continuing to add throughout the fall onto our website, in particular under our Get Started Hunting page, to help you on your journey throughout this fall, to give you the resources that you need. In addition, for anybody who recently has taken Hunter Trapper Education course, we're going to be providing a free subscription to our Game News magazine. That's a magazine that the agency has been putting out for decades now, and it is full of content that a young hunter would find beneficial on just stories from other hunters on tips and tactics and what they use to become successful. And we tailor that to the species that is in season. So in the next couple of months, there'll be articles on small game, and then go up into the big game seasons with deer and bear around December. So I would say use us as a resource. We're here to help you, to provide you with the tools. We're going to be providing videos, tips on not only how to be successful as far as hunting, but then more tips on what to do with the animals after you've harvested them, how to process them, how to cook them. So we want to provide you with everything you need from beginning to end. But obviously, there's only so much we can do as the agency. If you're looking for an individual who can help you and be there, side by side in the woods, which is a great way to learn as well, and how a lot of us have learned over the years, I would say reach out to your local rod and gun club. Again, if you've recently taken Hunter Ed, chances are it was at a club in your area. If you went to one of our in-person classes, and see if there's individuals there who are willing to take somebody out, especially when it comes to small game. I think you'll find that a lot of our hunters like sharing the knowledge and like taking an individual out with them. So at the local level, that's a resource. There's other resources as well. There's lots of sportsmen's clubs across the state. One that comes to mind is Pennsylvania Federation of Sportsmen's Clubs. Also, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is another great resource. Pheasants Forever, National Wild Turkey Federation, Rough Grouse Society, the list goes on. So there's plenty of other ways that you can join and become more active and find individuals who will take you out and provide that one-on-one basis where we as an agency can't provide. So, but to answer your first question, what's the first thing you can do? Use us as a resource. We're here to help. And certainly any questions that you might have after tonight, any questions that we haven't got to that are more specific, I believe Derek provided an email. Please feel free to use it and reach out to us. And our goal is to make you be successful and make sure you have a good time this fall.
Hey, I'm going to jump in here. I'm sorry. I'm going to jump in here real quick. This is AJ again. I spoke with one of my volunteer hunter education instructors today who was so excited about what we're doing here. And she wants the program, how we're doing this, the curriculum for her club. And she has a number of our volunteer hunter ed instructors who want to be mentors. So, I mean, this is a thing that is really, really growing. It's likely going to become a definite thing in your area. And, we're going to, throw somebody under the bus, which will be contact your region and ask, do they have information, about mentoring, other programs, because, that's your first contact, your local region. Every habitat, every area, it's all going to be different. And hopefully we can all, as part of the Game Commission, help you find the people you need to connect with. But give me a call. Seriously. We'll be here to help you.
All right, so I think we're going to do like maybe 2 more questions because we want to be respectful of your time. Let's see. Do I have to tag my squirrel? Do I have to report it?
All right, good question for Seth, the game warden, to help us answer. Tagging squirrels.
I can tell you that. You do not have to tag your squirrel if you're out in the field and you're out hunting, with yourself and another friend, and you have your bag limit of squirrels. You're not required to tag them. Only time you would be required to tag them is if you were going to give them to your friend to take home, give them in his possession, and he takes them home. You'd be required to tag all those squirrels before you transport them and give them to him, and you're riding in separate vehicles. And he would have to tag, or you would have to tag everything you harvested that day.
And what needs to be on that tag?
Your name, your address, your CID number, your contact information, your phone number as well. And
that CID, I can find that on my license, right?
Yes, your customer identification number is unique, and it's on everyone's license, on the back of their license, and it helps us identify who that belongs to.
Perfect. All right. And then we have some questions about what other species we might be covering in future webinars.
Great question. This is Derek. I can answer that. Coming up next, we're going to be helping you learn to hunt pheasants. So in the month of October, we have 3 pheasant-focused webinars, and the pheasant season starts this year on October 23rd. We have youth pheasant season. The youth pheasant days span October 9th through the 16th. And the regular pheasant season kicks off on October 23rd statewide. So we have a very dedicated group of pheasant hunters in Pennsylvania. We have over 250,000 pheasants that are stocked throughout the state, and they provide a really wonderful, exciting upland hunting opportunity for folks. And so we will encourage you to sign up for the pheasant hunting webinars. We're even going to have an in-person pheasant hunting class here in Harrisburg. So we will include that in the follow-up email because we really would love to have you back for another session. And the great thing about small game hunting is you can, in one day, you can hunt multiple species. You might have the opportunity to hunt a squirrel and a rabbit and a pheasant all in one day. And that would be a pretty phenomenal opportunity to get to harvest those different species. So pheasants are coming up next, and we are definitely getting requests for other topics for this Learn to Hunt series. So please, share that with us. If you have an idea or suggestion, something you really want to know about, you can use that email as Steve mentioned. It's still showing at the bottom of the screen here. It's mentoredhunting@pa.gov.
All right. We didn't get to everybody's questions, but we want to be respectful of your time. So we just want to remind everybody that all of the questions that we received, whether or not we got to them tonight, will be included in a follow-up email with answers. So everybody will get to see everybody's questions and all of the answers. Also in that email will be links to other great resources that Derek mentioned throughout the webinar tonight. And then you will receive a separate email that will have a link to the recording from tonight. So you're going to get 2 emails from us at least after this. And I just want to thank Derek for all of his great information, Seth, AJ, Steve, Megan, James for helping out tonight and sharing their expertise and time assisting us. We'd also like to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us, and we hope you'll visit us again to learn more about Pennsylvania wildlife in upcoming webinars. Don't forget, on your outdoor journey, the Pennsylvania Game Commission can help you learn to hunt. And with that, I think we will send everybody off. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck this fall.
Thank you. Have a great hunting season.
Good luck.
Thank you, guys. Good luck out there. Feel free to contact us with anything you need.